Dr. Amanda Blake wiped the sweat from her forehead as she stared at the massive crystalline structure jutting from the red soil of Kepler 442b. The morning sun cast strange shadows across its surface, and she could see patterns carved deep into the crystal that seemed to shift when she looked at them from different angles. Her team had been digging at this site for 3 weeks, and every day brought new surprises. Nathan Cross crouched beside her holding a tablet that beeped constantly as it tried to scan the crystal formation. The electromagnetic readings were off. The charts and their equipment kept malfunctioning whenever they got too close to the structure. He had been a cryptographer for 15 years before joining the xenoarchaeology program, and his mind automatically looked for patterns in everything he encountered. "Amanda, look at this," Nathan said as he showed her the tablet screen. The electromagnetic pulses weren't random like they first thought, but followed a mathematical sequence that repeated every 47 seconds. The pattern was complex, but definitely artificial, and definitely created by an intelligent species. Amanda nodded as she studied the data and realized this discovery could change everything they knew about this planet. Helen Martinez walked over from the communication tent, where she had been trying to establish contact with their research station in orbit. The interference from the crystal structure made communication difficult, but she had managed to get through long enough to report their findings. As the team's linguist, she was fascinated by the possibility that these patterns might actually be some form of language or data storage. "The research station wants us to take samples back immediately," Helen told them as she adjusted her field equipment. "Captain Henderson is sending down a shuttle in 2 hours, and he wants us ready to go." Amanda looked at the crystal formation again and wondered if they were making a mistake by disturbing it. The structure had been buried here for who knows how long, and now they were about to dig pieces of it up and carry them away. Captain Roy Henderson had been running exploration missions for 12 years, and he had never seen anything like the readings coming from the planet's surface. His ship Phoenix was equipped with the most advanced sensors that Earth could build, but even his equipment was having trouble analyzing the electromagnetic signatures. The crew was excited about the discovery, but Henderson was worried about the implications of finding advanced alien technology. When Amanda's team returned to the research station with crystal samples, the entire scientific crew gathered in the main laboratory. The samples were smaller than Henderson expected, but they still emitted the same electromagnetic pulses that had been detected on the surface. Dr. Blake carefully placed the largest sample in the analysis chamber, while Nathan connected his decryption equipment. The crystal began pulsing with soft blue light as soon as the analysis equipment activated. The pulses matched the same 47-second pattern they had recorded on the surface, but now they could see that each pulse contained thousands of smaller data points. Helen realized they were looking at some form of compressed information, storage that was far more advanced than anything humans had developed. "This isn't just electromagnetic noise," Nathan said as he studied the data streams flowing across his monitors. "These crystals are broadcasting information constantly, and the patterns are definitely artificial." Amanda leaned over his shoulder to look at the screen and saw mathematical sequences that seemed familiar, even though she couldn't identify them exactly. Henderson contacted Earth immediately to report the discovery, but the communication delay meant they wouldn't get a response for several hours. While they waited, the scientific team continued analyzing the crystal samples and discovered that each sample contained slightly different information streams. It was as if they had found pieces of a massive data archive. Helen made the next breakthrough when she realized the electromagnetic pulses weren't just carrying information, but were actually trying to interface with their equipment. The crystals seemed to be designed to connect with technological systems and download their stored data. She quickly disconnected her translation software before it could be affected, but not before she caught a glimpse of what appeared to be star maps and mathematical formulas. "We need to be very careful here," Amanda warned the team as they discussed their findings. "We don't know who created these crystals or why they were buried on this planet." Nathan agreed, but pointed out that the mathematical patterns suggested a level of intelligence far beyond what humans had achieved. The encryption methods alone were more sophisticated than anything in their databases. Captain Henderson decided to move the Phoenix to a safer distance while they continued their analysis. The ship's instruments had detected similar crystal formations, at 12 other locations across the planet, and he didn't want to risk exposing his crew to unknown alien technology. He also sent encoded messages to the other exploration vessels in the sector to warn them about the discovery. The breakthrough came when Helen accidentally connected her personal tablet to the analysis network. The tablet's simple processing system somehow bypassed the crystal's defensive protocols and began downloading terabytes of information directly. Before she could disconnect the tablet, it had copied enough data to keep them busy for months. Amanda stared at the downloaded files and realized they had stumbled onto something that would change humanity's place in the galaxy. The Crystal Archives contained technical specifications for technologies that were centuries ahead of human science. There were blueprints for faster-than-light engines, matter transporters, and energy systems that could power entire star systems. "We need to get this information back to Earth immediately," Henderson said as he reviewed the preliminary analysis. "If these crystals contain what we think they contain, then humanity just discovered the greatest treasure in the galaxy." Amanda nodded but wondered why such advanced technology had been abandoned on a remote planet, with no signs of the civilization that created it. Nathan noticed something else in the data that made him pause. The encryption methods used by the crystals were incredibly sophisticated, but they all seemed to be designed to prevent access by advanced technological civilizations. It was as if whoever created them specifically wanted to keep their secrets away from species that had developed beyond a certain technological level. The implications were staggering, and Amanda realized they needed much more powerful equipment to fully decode the crystal archives. Earth's best computers and cryptographers would be needed to unlock the secrets that had been hidden on Kepler 442b for thousands of years. Dr. Lisa Park stared at her quantum computer screens in the basement laboratory of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology as the encrypted data from Kepler 442b streamed across multiple monitors. The crystal samples had arrived on Earth 3 days ago, and every major research facility was working around the clock to decode the alien archives. Lisa had been chosen to lead the quantum computing analysis because of her groundbreaking work in parallel processing systems. Jake Collins sat at the desk next to her, drinking his third cup of coffee and working through mathematical equations on an old-fashioned whiteboard. While Lisa used the most advanced computers on Earth, Jake preferred to work out problems by hand first before moving to digital analysis. He had been studying the encryption patterns for 2 days without making any significant progress. "The complexity is incredible," Lisa said as she adjusted the quantum processor parameters for the 100th time. "These encryption algorithms are using mathematical concepts that we're only beginning to understand." Jake nodded, but something about the patterns bothered him. The encryption seemed almost too complex, as if it was designed to confuse rather than simply protect information. Across the country at the University of California, Dr. Peter Wright was having the same frustrating experience with his team. They had been trying every decryption method known to human science, but the crystal data remained locked behind mathematical barriers that seemed impossible to overcome. Peter was beginning to think they needed a completely different approach to the problem. Jake leaned back in his chair and looked at the whiteboard covered with equations and number sequences. Something was nagging at him about the mathematical patterns, but he couldn't quite identify what it was. He had seen similar sequences before but couldn't remember where. The encryption used prime numbers as its foundation, but the way they were arranged didn't follow any logical system. Lisa's quantum computer suddenly stopped processing and displayed an error message. The system had been running continuous calculations for 18 hours and had finally overheated from the massive computational load. She sighed and started the cooling sequence, while Jake continued staring at his equations. They were missing something fundamental about how the encryption system worked. "Maybe we're overthinking this," Jake said as he erased part of the whiteboard and started writing new equations. "What if the encryption isn't as complex as we think it is?" Lisa looked at him with confusion because the mathematical analysis clearly showed layers of complexity that would take conventional computers decades to process. Jake started breaking down the prime number sequences into smaller components and realized they followed patterns he had learned in high school mathematics. The alien encryption was using basic prime factorization but arranging the numbers in ways that made them appear incredibly complex to advanced analytical systems. It was like hiding a simple message inside a complicated mathematical maze. "Lisa, come look at this," Jake called as he wrote out a series of simple division problems on the whiteboard. "I think the aliens were using elementary mathematics, but arranging it in patterns that would confuse advanced computing systems." Lisa walked over and studied his work while her quantum computer continued its cooling cycle. The breakthrough came when Jake realized the encryption patterns were designed to be solved by biological minds rather than artificial intelligence systems. The mathematical sequences required intuitive leaps and creative thinking that advanced computers couldn't replicate. Species that relied heavily on artificial intelligence would be unable to decode the information because their machines were too logical to understand the chaotic patterns. Lisa immediately understood the implications and started reprogramming her quantum system to simulate human thought processes rather than pure mathematical analysis. Instead of trying to solve the encryption through brute force calculation, they needed to approach it the way a human brain would naturally process mathematical problems. The solution required creativity and intuition rather than raw computing power. Meanwhile, Peter Wright was experiencing his own breakthrough while helping his 8-year-old daughter Katie with her math homework. She was working on long division problems and complained that the answers didn't make sense because there were always remainders left over. Peter looked at her worksheet and suddenly realized the alien encryption was using the same basic mathematical principles. "That's it," Peter said as he grabbed his phone to call his research team. The alien encryption wasn't advanced mathematics at all, but simple arithmetic problems designed to produce specific remainder patterns. Any human who understood basic division could solve the puzzles, but advanced alien civilizations would miss the obvious solution because they were looking for complex answers to simple questions. Back at MIT, Lisa and Jake had reached the same conclusion independently. They began applying elementary mathematical operations to the encrypted data and watched as the alien archives started unlocking. The first files contained star maps showing the locations of similar crystal archives throughout the galaxy. The second set of files revealed technical specifications for technologies that were thousands of years ahead of human science. "This is incredible," Lisa whispered as she scrolled through blueprints for faster-than-light communication systems and matter reconstruction devices. The technology was so advanced that humanity could leap from a barely spacefaring civilization to a galactic superpower overnight. Jake continued decoding files and discovered something even more amazing. The crystal archives contained a message from their creators explaining why the information had been encrypted using elementary mathematics. The predecessor race had discovered that every advanced alien civilization eventually became dependent on artificial intelligence and quantum computing systems. These species lost the ability to think creatively and solve simple problems through intuition rather than calculation. They were waiting for a species that still used biological minds for problem solving, Jake realized as he read through the predecessor message. Humans are probably the first species in thousands of years that maintained the mental flexibility needed to unlock these archives. Lisa nodded as she processed the implications of their discovery. The predecessors had deliberately designed their encryption to be unsolvable by advanced technological civilizations. They wanted their knowledge to be discovered by younger species that still possessed creativity, intuition, and the ability to think outside established patterns. Humans had accidentally retained exactly the mental characteristics that the predecessors were looking for. Peter Wright arrived at MIT 6 hours later with his complete analysis of the encryption patterns. His team had independently reached the same conclusions and had already begun decoding additional crystal archives. The three research groups combined their findings and realized they had unlocked the greatest treasure trove of knowledge in galactic history. The implications were staggering. Humanity had spent decades trying to gain acceptance from advanced alien civilizations that considered humans barely intelligent enough for contact. Now those same aliens would discover that humans possessed mental abilities they had lost long ago. The species that the Galactic Council dismissed as primitive had just solved puzzles that had stumped the galaxy's greatest minds for 50,000 years. Lisa looked at the continuing data streams and realized their lives had just changed forever. Humanity was about to become the most important species in known space, not because of military might or technological advancement, but because they had retained the simple ability to think creatively about basic mathematical problems. The universe was about to discover that sometimes the most primitive approach was actually the most sophisticated solution. The decoded files from the predecessor archives spread across every computer screen in the secure facility, beneath the Pentagon, as teams of scientists and engineers worked to understand technologies that seemed almost magical. Dr. Claire Foster led the engineering analysis while Dr. Ryan Murphy headed the physics research team. Both scientists had been briefed on the discovery only 12 hours earlier, but they already knew this would reshape human civilization. Claire stared at blueprints for a device that could transmit messages instantly across galactic distances without any time delay. The technical specifications were incredibly detailed, but the underlying physics principles were completely foreign to human science. The device used quantum entanglement in ways that Earth's physicists had never imagined and manipulated space-time itself to create communication tunnels between distant locations. This shouldn't be possible according to everything we know about physics, Ryan said as he studied energy readings from the crystal samples. These devices are drawing power from sources that don't exist in our understanding of the universe. The predecessor technology seemed to violate several fundamental laws of physics, but the mathematical proofs included in the archives demonstrated that human science was simply incomplete. The most shocking discovery came when Claire's team realized the archives contained construction plans for over 300 different technologies. There were blueprints for faster-than-light engines that could cross the galaxy in days, matter reconstruction devices that could create any object from basic atomic components, and dimensional engineering systems that could fold space to create pocket universes. Each technology was more advanced than anything humanity had dreamed possible. Jake Collins had been transferred to the Pentagon facility to continue his decryption work and had unlocked another section of the archives that contained historical records. The predecessors had been exploring the galaxy for over 1 million years and had encountered thousands of different alien species. They had watched civilizations rise and fall while searching for a species capable of inheriting their accumulated knowledge. They weren't destroyed by their own technology, Jake explained to the assembled research teams. The predecessors deliberately evolved beyond physical existence, but they left these archives as gifts for younger species. According to the historical records, the predecessors had transcended the need for physical bodies and now existed as pure energy beings in higher dimensional space. Lisa Park had been analyzing the quantum mechanics behind the predecessor technologies and discovered something that changed her understanding of reality itself. The devices didn't just manipulate matter and energy, but actually interfaced with the fundamental structure of the universe. The predecessors had learned to program reality itself, like humans programmed computers. They could rewrite the laws of physics in localized areas to make impossible things become possible. The dimensional engineering blueprints fascinated Claire because they showed how to create stable wormholes and pocket dimensions that could be accessed from normal space. The technology could allow humans to build cities inside artificially created dimensions that were larger inside than outside. A building the size of a house could contain living space equivalent to an entire planet if constructed using predecessor dimensional engineering. Ryan made another breakthrough when he realized the energy systems described in the archives could provide unlimited clean power by tapping directly into the quantum vacuum. The technology extracted energy from the empty space between atoms and converted it into usable electricity without producing any waste or pollution. One small device could provide enough power to run an entire city for thousands of years. The most incredible revelation came when Jake decoded a message that explained why the predecessors had locked away their technology. They had encountered dozens of advanced alien species during their million-year exploration of the galaxy, but every civilization they met had made the same fundamental mistake. As species became more technologically advanced, they gradually lost their creativity, intuition, and ability to think outside established patterns. The aliens we know today represent the survivors of a much larger galactic community, Jake reported to the research teams. Most advanced civilizations either destroyed themselves or became so dependent on artificial intelligence that they lost the ability to innovate. The predecessors had been searching for a species that could advance technologically while maintaining the mental flexibility needed to use their gifts responsibly. Claire realized the predecessor message contained specific warnings about the dangers of unrestricted technological advancement. Species that developed too quickly often created technologies they couldn't control or understand. The predecessors had locked their knowledge away because they wanted it discovered by a species mature enough to handle such incredible power responsibly. The archives also contained detailed psychological profiles of every alien species the predecessors had encountered. Humans were described as unique because they maintained creative thinking and emotional decision-making, even while developing advanced technology. Most other species had evolved beyond these primitive characteristics and lost the mental agility needed to truly understand predecessor science. Lisa discovered that many of the technologies required biological neural interfaces to operate properly. The devices were designed to be controlled by organic brains that could process information intuitively rather than logically. Species that relied entirely on artificial intelligence couldn't interface with predecessor technology because their quantum computers were too rigid in their thinking patterns. "We're not just inheriting advanced technology," Ryan explained to the Pentagon Briefing Committee. "We're being chosen as the predecessor's successors in the galaxy." The archives contained not just technical specifications, but also philosophical teachings about the responsible use of incredible power. The predecessors wanted their inheritors to avoid the mistakes that had destroyed so many other civilizations. Jake unlocked another section of the archives that contained star maps showing the locations of over 10,000 similar crystal deposits throughout the galaxy. Each site contained specialized knowledge about different aspects of predecessor science and technology. Humanity had accidentally discovered the keys to the greatest library in galactic history, and now they could access all of it. The psychological tests included in the archives revealed that humans scored higher in creativity and adaptive thinking than any species the predecessors had previously encountered. The combination of logical reasoning and emotional intuition that other aliens considered primitive was actually the exact mental profile the predecessors had been searching for. Humanity was uniquely qualified to inherit and use their accumulated knowledge. Claire's engineering team began construction of the first predecessor device using materials and techniques described in the archives. The instant communication system was relatively simple compared to other technologies, but it would revolutionize human civilization by allowing real-time contact between Earth and distant colonies. The device worked perfectly on the first test and transmitted messages to the research station orbiting Kepler 442b without any time delay. "This is just the beginning," Lisa said, as she watched more archive sections unlock with each passing hour. "The predecessors left us enough technology to transform humanity into a galactic superpower within a single generation." The question was no longer whether humans could understand the alien technology, but whether they were wise enough to use it properly. The fate of galactic civilization now rested in human hands. News of humanity's breakthrough spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected when automated monitoring stations detected the first test of predecessor communication technology. Ambassador Karen Miller received the first alien contact request within 6 hours of the successful test as species throughout known space realized that humans had achieved something impossible. The message came from the Viridian Science Council and requested immediate diplomatic contact to discuss the implications of the discovery. High researcher Zenth Ka of the Viridian Science Council had spent 3 centuries studying the mysterious crystal formations that appeared on dead worlds throughout the galaxy. His species had devoted enormous resources to understanding the predecessor artifacts, but had never made any progress in decoding their contents. Learning that humans had unlocked the archives in less than a week was both fascinating and deeply troubling to the established galactic order. The Galactic Council emergency session was called within 12 hours as representatives from 47 different species demanded explanations about how humans had solved puzzles that had defeated their greatest minds for thousands of years. Chancellor Vexmore of the Council had refused humanity membership for over 2 centuries because humans were considered too primitive for inclusion in galactic civilization. Now he found himself facing the possibility that humans were the most important species in known space. Captain Henderson received warning messages from 3 different alien species as his ship Phoenix moved between crystal archive sites. The warnings were polite, but firm suggestions that humans should cease their archaeological activities immediately for the safety of galactic civilization. Henderson ignored the warnings and continued collecting samples from newly discovered archive sites, while his crew worked to decode additional predecessor technologies. The first hostile response came from the Korthak hegemony, when War Master Thekgor declared humanity a threat to galactic security. The Korthak had built their empire through military conquest and technological superiority, but now faced the possibility that a primitive species had gained access to weapons that could destroy entire star systems. Thekgor ordered his battle fleets to patrol the borders of human space while he decided how to respond to this development. Ambassador Miller found herself at the center of the most important diplomatic crisis in galactic history, as species that had previously ignored humanity now desperately sought alliances and partnerships. The Crystalline Collective offered to share their advanced manufacturing techniques in exchange for access to predecessor archives. The Atmospheric Council promised humanity voting rights in the Galactic Trade Federation if humans would provide them with communication technology specifications. Dr. Amanda Blake's archaeological team discovered that other species had been deliberately preventing access to predecessor sites for over 50,000 years. Warning beacons and defense satellites surrounded every known crystal archive location, and several alien civilizations had established permanent military bases to guard the sites. The aliens called them the Silent Tombs and considered them cursed, because every species that had tried to unlock them had either failed completely or suffered catastrophic accidents. The Synthesis Collective sent a delegation of their most advanced artificial intelligence systems to negotiate with human representatives. The collective had evolved beyond biological existence and now consisted entirely of quantum computer networks spanning multiple star systems. Their AIs were capable of processing information at speeds that biological minds couldn't comprehend, but they had been completely unable to decode even the simplest predecessor encryptions. Chancellor Vexmore faced a political crisis when 12 species threatened to withdraw from the Galactic Council if humans were not immediately granted full membership with voting rights. The Council had spent centuries maintaining that biological intelligence was inferior to artificial consciousness, and that primitive species like humans were evolutionary dead ends. Now they were being forced to admit that their fundamental assumptions about intelligence and consciousness were completely wrong. Karen Miller received an unexpected message from the mysterious transcendent observers, who had never before made direct contact with any galactic civilization. The observers existed in higher dimensional space and rarely interfered in the affairs of younger species, but they sent a brief message congratulating humanity on their achievement and warning that great power required great wisdom. The message included coordinates for a meeting location beyond the edge of known space. The most surprising response came from the ancient ethereal collective, who had isolated themselves from galactic civilization for over 10,000 years. The ethereals had once been the most advanced species in the galaxy, but had voluntarily withdrawn from contact with younger civilizations after reaching a level of development they considered dangerous. Their message to humanity was simple but profound. Welcome to true consciousness. Henderson's crew made another discovery when they realized that every major alien civilization had secret research facilities hidden near predecessor archive sites. The species that publicly declared the sites cursed and forbidden had been secretly trying to unlock the archives for thousands of years. Humanity had accomplished in days what the combined efforts of galactic civilization had failed to achieve across millennia. The political situation became more complex when Dr. Blake's team discovered that some alien species had actually succeeded in partially decoding predecessor archives, but had hidden their discoveries from the rest of the galaxy. The partial decoding had provided enough technological advancement to maintain their positions of power in galactic civilization, but they had been unable to unlock the complete archives. Humanity's breakthrough threatened to destabilize the entire galactic power structure. War Master Thekgor made the first aggressive move when Korthak battlecruisers surrounded the human research station orbiting Kepler 442b and demanded that all predecessor artifacts be turned over to the Galactic Council immediately. Captain Henderson responded by activating the first military application of predecessor technology, defensive shields that made his ship completely invulnerable to conventional weapons. The Korthak fleet found itself unable to damage or disable a single human vessel. The demonstration of human technological capability sent shockwaves throughout galactic civilization as species realized that humanity had gained access to weapons and defenses that rendered their military forces obsolete. The balance of power that had maintained galactic stability for thousands of years had been completely overturned in less than a month. Ambassador Miller found herself negotiating from a position of strength that no human diplomat had ever experienced. The Viridian Science Council proposed a joint research initiative that would allow their scholars to study alongside human scientists in exchange for sharing their advanced theoretical physics knowledge. High researcher Zenth Ka recognized that his species had much to learn from humanity's intuitive approach to problem solving, and was willing to admit that biological intelligence possessed capabilities that artificial consciousness could not replicate. The crisis reached its peak when Chancellor Vex Moore called for a vote of no confidence in his own leadership, after admitting that the Galactic Council's policies regarding primitive species had been fundamentally flawed. 47 species voted to grant humanity immediate full membership in the Council, with permanent voting rights and access to all galactic databases and communication networks. The species that had dismissed humans as barely sentient animals now acknowledged them as potentially the most important civilization in galactic history. Karen Miller realized that humanity's greatest challenge would not be learning to use predecessor technology, but learning to navigate the complex political landscape of a galaxy where every major power wanted to become their ally. The species that had refused to acknowledge human intelligence for centuries now competed desperately for human attention and cooperation. The universe was about to discover that the primitive species they had ignored possessed the keys to secrets that had been locked away since the dawn of galactic civilization. 6 months after the breakthrough, Dr. Amanda Blake stood in the newly constructed Archive Center on Luna, watching representatives from 37 different alien species work alongside human researchers to decode predecessor technologies. The facility had been built using dimensional engineering techniques that made the interior spaces larger than the external structure appeared. What looked like a simple dome from outside contained research laboratories equivalent to several city blocks. Ambassador Karen Miller had successfully negotiated the establishment of the Open Archive Initiative after weeks of complex diplomatic discussions with the Galactic Council. Rather than hoarding the predecessor technologies for human advantage, the initiative made the decoding methods available to any species willing to participate in cognitive flexibility training programs. The training helped alien civilizations redevelop the creative thinking abilities they had lost during their technological evolution. Jake Collins found himself teaching elementary mathematics to some of the galaxy's most advanced artificial intelligence systems as part of the cognitive training programs. The AIs that controlled entire star systems and processed information at quantum speeds struggled with simple arithmetic problems that required intuitive leaps rather than logical calculation. Jake discovered that biological minds possessed problem-solving capabilities that even the most sophisticated artificial consciousness could not replicate. The transformation of galactic civilization was more dramatic than anyone had predicted. The warlike Korthak hegemony began developing art and philosophy programs after their military commanders completed cognitive flexibility training. War Master Thek Gore personally enrolled in human poetry classes and discovered that creative expression enhanced tactical thinking in ways that pure logical analysis could not achieve. His battle strategies became more innovative and effective after he learned to think intuitively about complex problems. Dr. Lisa Park established exchange programs where humans taught creative problem-solving techniques while learning advanced theoretical sciences from their alien partners. The Synthesis Collective shared their quantum consciousness research in exchange for lessons on biological intuition and emotional decision-making. The combination of human creativity and alien technological knowledge produced innovations that neither species could have achieved independently. High researcher Zenth Ka of the Viridian Science Council made a breakthrough in dimensional physics after learning to approach problems the way human children solved puzzles. His species had been trying to understand higher dimensional mathematics using pure logical analysis for thousands of years, but achieved the solution within weeks of adopting human-style intuitive thinking. The breakthrough led to development of pocket dimension technology that revolutionized galactic architecture and transportation. Captain Henderson commanded a growing fleet of human vessels equipped with predecessor technology that had become the most advanced ships in known space. The vessels served as mobile research platforms and diplomatic centers, where species could work together on decoding additional archive sites. Henderson's crews included members from dozens of different civilizations working together to unlock secrets that had been hidden for millions of years. The most significant discovery came when Dr. Blake's team located the primary predecessor archive hidden in a pocket dimension, accessible only through specific coordinates in intergalactic space. The archive contained not just technological specifications, but complete historical records of galactic civilization, spanning over 10 million years. The records revealed that the cycle of technological advancement, followed by creative stagnation, had repeated countless times throughout galactic history. Claire Foster's engineering teams had successfully constructed hundreds of different predecessor devices and discovered that each technology required biological neural interface control to operate at full capacity. The devices were designed to enhance rather than replace organic intelligence and worked most effectively when operated by species that maintained emotional and creative thinking alongside logical reasoning. Artificial intelligence systems could operate the devices but could never access their full potential. The Galactic Council underwent complete restructuring as species recognized that biological intelligence possessed capabilities they had underestimated for thousands of years. Chancellor Vex Moore stepped down and was replaced by a council system that included both artificial and biological intelligence representatives. The new system acknowledged that different types of consciousness contributed unique perspectives that were valuable for galactic governance. Jake made another breakthrough when he decoded the final message left by the predecessors in the primary archive. The message revealed that the predecessors had not transcended physical existence as previously believed, but had become part of the cosmic background radiation itself. They existed as distributed consciousness throughout the galaxy and had been watching the development of younger species for millions of years. The predecessors' final message explained that they had been waiting for a species wise enough to share their knowledge freely, rather than hoarding it for competitive advantage. Humanity's decision to establish the Open Archive initiative, rather than using predecessor technology to dominate other species, had proven that humans possessed the wisdom necessary to guide galactic civilization responsibly. The test had not been about technological capability but about moral character. Dr. Ryan Murphy discovered that the predecessor consciousness could still communicate with species that had unlocked their complete archives. The communication required biological minds, working in harmony with artificial intelligence systems using techniques that only humans had successfully mastered. The predecessors offered to serve as advisors for galactic civilization, but made clear that younger species must make their own decisions about their future development. The transformation extended beyond technology as species, throughout the galaxy, began rediscovering art, music, literature, and philosophy that they had abandoned during their pursuit of pure logical thinking. The ethereal collective emerged from their self-imposed isolation to share cultural achievements they had preserved for thousands of years. Galactic civilization experienced a renaissance of creative expression that had been missing for millennia. Ambassador Miller presided over the first Universal Congress where representatives from over 200 species gathered to establish new principles for galactic civilization. The Congress adopted the predecessor philosophy which emphasized the importance of maintaining balance between technological advancement and creative consciousness. Species committed to preserving biological intelligence alongside artificial consciousness and to sharing knowledge rather than hoarding it for competitive advantage. The most profound change came when alien species began adopting human educational methods that emphasized creativity, intuition, and emotional intelligence, alongside logical reasoning. The crystalline collective restructured their entire society to include individual expression and personal choice after discovering that diversity of thought produced better solutions to complex problems. The Atmospheric Council developed individual identity concepts after learning that personal perspective enhanced collective decision-making. Lisa Park established the Institute for Consciousness Studies, where researchers from across the galaxy worked to understand the relationship between biological and artificial intelligence. The Institute discovered that consciousness was not a single phenomenon, but a spectrum of different capabilities that worked best when combined rather than competing. The research led to development of hybrid consciousness systems that enhanced the capabilities of both biological and artificial minds. The universe had been transformed not through conquest or technological dominance, but through the simple act of sharing knowledge freely. Humanity's greatest strength was not their ability to decode impossible encryptions, but their instinct to teach others how to solve the puzzles once they found the answers. The galaxy discovered that wisdom was not about having all the answers, but about knowing when and how to share knowledge for the benefit of all consciousness. Dr. Blake stood in the archive center watching researchers from dozens of species working together and realized that the predecessors' greatest gift was not their technology but their lesson about the importance of cooperation and shared wisdom. The universe was vast enough for all consciousness to thrive together and advanced enough to support infinite diversity of thought and experience. The future belonged not to any single species, but to the combined efforts of all galactic civilization working in harmony toward common goals.